Hi everyone, my name is Riley Kowaleski, Educational Technology Specialist here at Marywood, and I just wanted to walk you through how to use Google Forms. So if you've used it in the past, there has been a recent update, so some things are moved around, but we'll get to it. We'll go through the basic question types. We'll go over how to set up your settings for the different surveys, so you can kind of monitor if you get emails or things like that. And then we'll also show you how to send them out. So we're going to start off with this little area right here. We are currently sharing my Marywood inbox. So I usually start off here because it has a nice little Google Apps icon in the top right. So if you click on Google Apps, you'll see that we have a couple different tools here, and Forms is one of them. So just so you know, when you do create a Google form, it goes into your Google Drive. So Drive is pretty much just like your cloud storage for your Google account. And since your Google accounts are Marywood affiliated, you get all of this for free. So if you click on Forms, it brings you straight to the Forms tool. Though if you went to Google Drive, you could also click New and then New Form, and you'd still get the same sort of setup. But I like to click on Forms. And when I do that, it comes up with this toolbar at the top where you could start a new form, either from complete scratch or something templated that they have over here. We also have more templates in here that are Marywood specific. We don't, but if we did have templates, they would be here. But there are some general ones like find a time, RSVP, party invites, things like that. So if any of these were pertaining to your current situation that you need a Google form for, you can use them to start off. So they are a good jumping point if you're not sure where to start. But if you have interacted with forms before, if you are an editor on any of these forms, you'll see them here in your recent. So I have a whole bunch. And you can see these little people icons mean that they're shared with others. The ones that don't have icons there mean that they are personal to you. So if any of these were ones you wanted to work on, then you could just click on them to open them up. But I think we're going to start from scratch here. So I'm going to click on blank. And it opens up a new blank form. So this is your starting point for any Google form that you make. And usually what I like to do here is start off with a title, which is quite nice. So just so I know my context for what I'm doing here, I'm going to call this one Ice Cream Survey. So this is kind of like, I'm going to survey a group of people on what their favorite ice cream is. I'm going to ask them some questions about how they feel about ice cream, how they feel about other people's ideas about ice cream, things like that. There are plenty of different question types for Google Forms that we will see in a couple minutes. So you can kind of use the ones that make the most sense for you. You can also create different sections in Google Forms. You could kind of create like a basic branching logic system. So we'll talk about that as well. But the good place to start is a nice title. And what I also do is after I type my title, I come up here to Untitled Form and click there to kind of make the title of the form talk to the file name of the form. So these are kind of different. The title of the form is what shows to your recipients, your respondents. The file name is what you see in Google Drive. So this is how you kind of identify your surveys. So if you have the same survey you're going to be sending out across multiple years, you can always come in here and just change the name. You can say like revised and then the date, or you can say what version it is, and it won't reflect here in the main title of your form. So I usually click up here just so it's not untitled, and then I know what it is. We could also see here there's a move to folder. So if you wanted to organize your form, you could do that just by clicking on the folder. You can also star it because in Google Drive, there is a starred section. So if you want to keep this in your Google Drive separate from everything else, just so you can find it more easily, then you can definitely star it. If we go right along the top here over to the right side of the screen, we'll see the customized theme where it opens up a pane and we can then click on a color that we want to use. So we have, all manners of green for Marywood. We could also add a custom color. So if you wanted to grab the hex code of our Marywood green or Marywood yellow or gold, you can definitely do that. But just clicking on these colors gets you pretty far. And as you click a color, you could also change the background color to like a lighter green or darker green, depending on what you like. You could also change the font down here. The basic is usually what we go for just because it's easier to read, but you can definitely change it to whatever you like. Then you could also add an image if you want, just to make it stand out from other forms. So I'm going to X out of that so I can have the full range of my screen. And to the right of the little art palette, we also have an eyeball. And this is for previewing your form, which we will do later on in this session because previewing is helpful to see if your branching logic works or if certain questions are marked as required. So we will go back to this later. But there's also a settings area. And some accounts are updated for Google Forms and some are not. So in some cases, you may see the setting area as a kind of extra tab here, in which case you would just click on it and it has a couple different ways to set up the settings, or you can click on this little cog icon here. So I'll actually show you what the other option looks like in case you do encounter it. It should be here. You can see questions and then responses, which is normal across all Google Forms, but the newest update has settings as a third tab. So if you do see it here, then just give it a click. In this settings area, you can choose to make it a quiz because you can do quizzes in Google Forms, but we have that unchecked because we started with a blank survey instead of a quiz. And then it's broken up into different sections for your different settings. So here under responses, we can manage how the responses are collected and protected. So if we click on this little down arrow here, it opens up our options. So the first one is to collect email addresses, and then this is required to send response copies. So if you do want to send them like a receipt of their answers, you do want to collect email addresses. But if this is something like an anonymous survey, you do not want to collect email addresses. So the purple or whatever color this ends up being for you means that it is enabled. So if you click on it to make it gray and turn off to the left, that means it's disabled. So we cannot collect email addresses if this is gray. If we do want to collect email addresses, you just give it a click and it enables. If you do choose to collect email addresses, you can choose to send response receipts. So you can send responders a copy of their response. Right now it's turned to off, but the options are when requested and always. So I usually do this for my training registrations just because I want people to know what they signed up for, because sometimes it's hard to remember. So I always set it to always because then when they finish my form for registration, they'll get a copy in their email of what they actually signed up for. So it's a good reminder of, hey, this is what you signed up for in this form, but you don't need it. It's completely up to you. You can also choose to have them request a copy. So once they submit that form, it'll say request a copy of your responses, and then it'll send them an email. So that's an option if you want it to be optional. If you don't want it to be an option at all, then you could just keep it on off. And remember, if you are not collecting email addresses, this is not an option for you. You can also allow response editing. So after they submit, they can then go back and edit their response if you enable this. Usually we disable it, especially if you're getting like a sort of batch survey where you're getting a bunch of different responses like feelings or opinions on things. You don't really want them going back and editing their opinions just for like data integrity. So usually we keep this disabled, but if you wanted to enable it, again, you just give it a click. And you'll also notice as you change these different settings, up here in the top left, it'll say all changes saved in Drive. So it automatically saves every time you change something. So you never have to worry about doing Control S or File Save in here. It's just automatically saved to your Google Drive and you don't have to worry about losing anything. So going on down the page, we have these two options that require users to sign in to access your form. So this first one is restrict to users in Marywood University and its trusted organizations. So for this one, I usually keep it on for my registration forms because I'm usually just doing it for the Marywood community. But if you want people outside of Marywood to respond to your survey, you want to uncheck this. So that means if you send out a link to like everybody at Marywood and you can forward it on to other people that are outside of the community, then you want to uncheck this so that it reaches everybody. Otherwise, if this is checked, then people will have to sign in with Google. And if it's not a trusted organization or a Marywood affiliated organization, then they will not be able to access the form at all. Now keep in mind that all of these settings are changeable at any time. So if you get a response, like an email from someone saying, hey, I can't access this form because it says I'm restricted, you could always come into the settings and check on this to then enable it or disable it depending on the situation. So, it's not like these are set in stone, but they are a good place to start your form out. And if it's not working, you can change some things as you go. So I'm going to keep this checked. And then the last one that requires sign in is limit to one response. And the reason that requires a sign in is because you want to make sure each account gets one response. And especially if you're not collecting email addresses, it'll make them sign in just so that the system knows, okay, they got one response in, we're not going to let them do any more. So this doesn't mean that they're collecting email addresses if you have this turned off. It just means that they are limiting whatever account is signing in to just one response. Otherwise, once they submit, it'll say submit another response and they can go in and submit again. So you might want to do that if you're doing a sort of preferences survey. And then finally, I'm going to collapse this just so I can see the page a little better. But finally, we have the presentation section. And if we click that arrow again, we have some options. So if you plan on using sections, each section equates to a page. So if you want to show a progress bar to show people how far along they are in your survey, then this is a great option if you plan on using sections. If you want to shuffle the question order, you can definitely do that. I feel like that's more for quizzes, but if you want to shuffle everything, that's totally an option. Confirmation message, you can edit this at any time. I think I changed this to thanks for taking the time to help out, but it says something like your response has been recorded as a default. So you could just click edit, change the text, and then click save. You can also show link to submit another response. So if you don't have it limited to one response, then you can show a link to have them submit another one if you want them to. You can also show a results summary. So if you wanted to show the graphs and visual representations of your data to the respondents after they respond, then definitely try that out. I think one use case that I saw where this worked really well was when they were trying to name the Marywood Heights. And they had a bunch of different names and people voted for them. And after you voted, it showed you the results so far. As of your submission, what are the results, what name is winning. So it was cool to see what name was going the furthest. And that was a good use of this option. And then finally, you can disable autosave for all respondents, which is a new one. So this means that it doesn't autosave as they go, which I'm sure you can find a use case for that, but so far I haven't. But it says respondents will lose their progress if their browser closes or refreshes. So if they have it open for too long, it disables that autosave. But this is disabled by default, so if you don't want it, you don't have to worry about it. So down here, we also have some defaults. So if you plan on using a whole bunch of surveys and making a whole bunch, you can use these defaults to kind of fill out your forms ahead of time. And by that, I mean setting up the settings a little bit more automatically. So this first one is form defaults. So the settings applied to this form and new forms. We can have collect email addresses set as the default. And then if you wanted to change that, you could do it survey by survey. We also have question defaults. So do you want to make the questions required by default? And usually I do because I find that I have more required questions than optional questions. So I like to have them required by default. So I just have to uncheck it if I don't want it required. So those are your two default settings that you can adjust. And then we have these settings as well. Now, if I go back to my other ice cream survey, this is a different situation because this is the old version of Google Forms. So we have the little cog icon up here, and if I click on that, it brings up a little pop-up window. And it's the same sort of settings, just organized a bit differently. So on this general tab, we have the option to collect emails. And then if you check it, you can set up response receipts, as we talked about before. You can also do the require sign-in options. So that's the restrictions and then the limit to one response, same as before, just in a different area. And then after respondents submit, they can edit if you check this and then see summary charts and text responses, which is that overview of responses that we talked about. And if you click over to presentation, you'll see the progress bar, the shuffling, and then show link to submit another response, which I will uncheck because I don't want to do that on this one. I will add a progress bar though, just because I will add sections. This is also where you can change your confirmation message. So I'll say something like, thank you for your help. something nice and affirmative. And then we also have that restrictions for disabling autosave. So they're just in two separate areas, a different location on the page, but it's the same settings. And then of course we have the quizzes tab, but we're not doing a quiz. So I am going to click collect emails on here. I'm not going to do response receipts. I'm going to restrict. And then you click save and it saves up here. And once you see that all changes are saved in Drive, then you're good to go. So another thing I want to say before we continue on with actually making the form is that there are some options up here in the kebab menu, which is the 3 vertical dots. We call it a kebab. So if you click on that, we have the option to add collaborators. So if you're working with a partner or you're working with a coworker, you want to click add collaborators and you can add anyone's email and it makes them an automatic editor of this form. So this is not sending it out for people to fill out, it's sending it for people to collaborate on it with you. And unlike other Google Drive files like Google Docs, Google Sheets, and Google Slides, you can only set them as editors. Those other file types you can set like viewers, commenters, or editors, but here in Forms, it's only editors. So you can add people or groups if you like doing the Google contact groups, or you like Google Groups. So if you have a partner or a coworker you want to add to this, you can definitely just add a person here. And once you click done, it sends them an email saying that you've shared it with them, and then they could access it as well. So this is an option if you do have a partner and you want to work with them. Otherwise, if you click out of it, the other options here are the make a copy of a form, which is useful if you want to use the same sort of template that you're making. You can move it to trash if you want to delete it. You can also print it, get a pre-filled link, and then set some preferences. And this is where the default settings are for the old version of Google Forms. So this is where your questions are required. You can collect emails for everything. So that's where that's located on the old version. All right, so let's get started on actually filling out this survey. So what I'm going to do here, drag this one back over. We're going to start off with the form description. So before we even start with our questions, we're going to go on with a description. And this shows up when they open up the form, they see the title, so ice cream survey, and then underneath it, they see the description. And this is a good place to put like any rules for the form, any instructions that you want to give, any disclaimers, anything you want to put is good right here. And you can use links in here if you want to use a URL to link somewhere else. So you can add those different elements as well. So I can say, just getting an idea of what kinds of ice cream everyone enjoys. So something you want to put in, anything personal, anything directional, disclaimers, anything you want to put up here that is important for them to know before they start filling out the form. All right. So you'll notice along the right-hand side, whenever you click in a section or little segment of your form, you'll see this little toolbar. And what comes up is a plus button to add a question. And then we also have import questions. So if there's a form that was shared with you, like as an editor, or one you've created before, you can import questions from any surveys that you have editing access to, so that you are added to as a collaborator. So if you have any questions you want to import, this would be where you'd go. We also have add a title and description, which is good for your sections if you want to add just like a break in the middle to say, okay, this is a different type of question that we're answering. It's a good indication of a topic switch within your form. You can also add an image if that's helpful for your form. You can also add a video, and then this last one is add a section, which we will use a little bit later. So here, when we go to start entering our questions, they give you one as a default, which is a multiple choice. And you just have to click on it in order to edit it. And that's good to know going forward, because as you create more questions, you want to go back and edit some. You could just click on the question to start editing it. So if it doesn't look editable at first, it's because you need to click on it. So our first question, even though it's a multiple choice, I think I want it to be something else. So what I'm going to do is click here on my multiple choice option and click on short answer instead. This gives you an idea of how many different question types we have available. We have our short answer, our paragraph, multiple choice, checkboxes, dropdown, file upload, linear scale, multiple choice grid, checkbox grid, date, and time. So we're going to start off at the top with our short answer question. So I'm going to change it, and we're going to start putting in our question. So for this first one is, what is your name? That's a pretty easy short answer question. It requires a text response, but it's not like a paragraph. So this is a great idea for a short answer. Now, if I were to just type this out, what is your name, and it was still set as multiple choice, Google kind of takes into account what kind of question you're asking and provides a suggestion for a question type as a result. So it probably would have given me short answer as the type, but I wanted to select it ahead of time just because I knew what I wanted. So if I wanted to add an image to this question specifically, I could just click on this little icon over here. If I wanted to copy this question, you can click duplicate at the bottom. Then if you want to delete it, it's here on the trash can. You can also see the required toggle, and because I have that default set to require every question, that's why it's already clicked over. Otherwise, you'd see it as gray, and then you could just click it to enable the requirement. And then finally, over here in the other kebab menu, we have show a description. So we could add a little description to the question, maybe to add a little context, and then response validation as well. So this is pretty easy for a short answer. You just provide the question, and that's pretty much it. So if I click the plus button, it adds a question right below where we're currently editing. So add a question, puts a question here. Then I can go in and maybe say, I'm going to start typing and see what Google actually says. So my second question will be, in general, what are your feelings about ice cream? So it actually did the right thing. I was going for a paragraph type question, and Google figured that out. So it shows paragraph for me, and that's good because I require a couple sentences about feelings about ice cream. And just like with the short answer, you could add a picture if you want. You can duplicate it, delete it, require it, and then look for a description or response validation. Then I'm just going to click the plus button again, because those two are pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to go with the multiple choice this time, just because it's the next one in our list. And multiple choice requires a little more interaction from you, but it's pretty easy anyway. You provide the question, and then you provide the different options. So for my question here, I'll say, what is your favorite flavor from these three classes? So you're probably going to guess what I'm about to say, but that'll be vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. Now, if you didn't see how I was actually adding those options, the easiest way to do it, and I'm going to X these out, which is something you can also do. You can delete options if you don't like them anymore. The easiest way to go about adding multiple choice options is actually to hit the Enter key after you're done typing the first one. So with vanilla here, I could click down here and say add option, but I just want to go straight to my next option because I know what I'm going to type. So if I hit the Enter key, it adds a new option for me, and I could just type over the preloaded text and put chocolate. And same with strawberry. If I just hit the Enter key, it adds a new line for me, and then I can click and start typing strawberry. Now you could also notice with each of these options, you can provide an image. So if you wanted to provide an image of vanilla ice cream, chocolate ice cream, and strawberry ice cream, just for some context in case someone might not know what those flavors are, you can do that just by clicking add an image. And it brings up this whole array of source options. So we have an upload from a computer. We also have camera, which does your webcam, which I do not want to do. We also have URL, photos, and then Google Drive if you have any images, and then Google image search. So you could do all that straight here from the Google Forms area. You don't have to go into a new tab or anything. You can just click on Google image search and type away. Or if you had one on hand, you could just upload it or put the URL in. So pretty simple. So for multiple choice, you still have that duplicate option. You can also delete it. You can require it, And then here in the kebab, we have description, shuffle, option order. So if you want them to be shuffled, you could do that. And we also have go to section based on answer. And that's something we're going to look at a little bit later. And that's kind of the start of our branching logic. So say I wanted to create a section for people who answered vanilla on this. And I'd ask them like, why did you choose vanilla? What's so important about vanilla? That would be in a separate section for people who only answered vanilla. So that would be an option for something like this, but we'll look into it a little bit later. You'll also notice here that you can add an other option for your multiple choice questions. So if you wanted someone to add a custom answer, then you could definitely do that just by clicking this. But because I'm asking for them to pick from these 3 different flavors, I'm just going to leave it at the 3 and move on. So we're going to click the plus button just to continue forward. So now our next question is going to be a checkbox question because that's next up in our line. So I'm going to give that a click on checkboxes. Then our question is actually going to be, which of the following flavors sound appealing? You may select multiple. So this, it really doesn't need too much explanation. You don't need to say that you can select multiple options because they will appear as actual checkboxes instead of the radio buttons that are so familiar for multiple choice questions. So you can just leave it at which of the following flavors sound appealing, but I chose to add that extra text just in case someone wasn't aware because the previous question was a 1 answer only. So I'm going to add a couple options here. So maybe my first one will be Rocky Road, and then we can hit the enter key to add another option. Buttered pecan's a good one. Enter key. Fudge ripple. Enter key again. Cookies and cream. And then my final option will be pistachio. So say I looked at this list and I didn't like how it was organized. Maybe I want pistachio first so that it's not the last option here. Maybe I actually like pistachio and I want them to see it first, so maybe they consider it instead of just writing it off since it's at the end. You can actually adjust all of your options, and this goes for multiple choice as well. If you hover over the option with your cursor, your little arrow, you'll see these series of dots to the left of the checkbox or the radio button, depending on which question type you're in. You can just hover over it and you get like this 4-headed arrow, and you can just click on that drag icon with your left button on your mouse, just drag it on up and release it, and now it's in a new area. So pistachio is now at the top, no longer relinquished to the bottom. And again, if you wanted to delete anything, just give that a little click on the X over here. And then if you want to add an option or add other, you could do that as well for checkboxes. But I asked which of the following sounds appealing, so I don't really want them to put in their own, so I'm going to leave it as it is. So I'm going to click on the plus button to add another question. And here I'm going to select Dropdown. So here for the question, I'm going to say, which type of cone do you prefer? So this could also be a multiple choice question, but drop-downs are pretty good for very long lists of things that you want someone to choose one selection from. So I have 6 options here that I want to put in, and that's a bit long for a multiple choice because it would make the form longer too. So this kind of condenses the size of the question. It makes it a lot less intimidating. At least I think so. So for option 1, I'm going to put cake cone. Hit the enter key. My second option is sugar cone. Enter key. Third option is waffle cone, which is my personal favorite. Enter key, pretzel cone. Enter key, chocolate dipped cone. And my final option is going to be no cone. I prefer a cup, which is me usually, especially for soft ice cream. So we have these 6 options, and it's a drop-down situation. So they'll get like a single drop-down area. They click on it and select one of these options. And you'll notice here that with the drop-down, you cannot enter a custom option. So with our checkbox and our multiple choice, you can definitely put in an other option so they could put in their own custom answer. But with drop-downs, you cannot do that. So keep that in mind. It's more for a long list of things to select from, and you cannot add a custom option. So we can also add our images here. You'll also notice you can't add images for dropdowns because it is such a condensed question type, but you can duplicate it if you like. You can delete it again, require it. You could also do a description. And with this question type, you could also go to a section based on an answer provided here. You could shuffle the option order as well. So the three different question types where you can go to a different section based on an answer are actually multiple choice, drop down, and actually it's only two types, multiple choice and drop down, because checkboxes you can do a lot. So it would be a little confusing to branch logic off of a bunch of different answers. So you have your multiple choice and your drop down, and those both can be set up to direct to a different area of the quiz or survey depending on what their answers are. So I'm going to add another question here. And this time we're going to go with a Likert scale or linear scale, whichever one you want to call it, it's the same. And my question here needs to be something that indicates a range. So we're going to say on a scale from 1 to 5. I like to detail what the scale actually is before they see it, just so they know when they're thinking of the question, like, oh, well, where do I put it on that range? So on a scale from 1 to 5, how do you feel about sprinkles? Now, personally, I love sprinkles, but my father is completely against them. He gets upset when people get sprinkles. So I think this is a very apt question to ask. So with these linear scales, Google actually selected it for me, which is great. These linear scales, you can set your scale from 0 or 1 all the way up to 2 or 10. So you could go 1 to 2, 0 to 2, or all the way up to 10. And you can set a label for each end of the spectrum. So for my label here for a 1 rating, it's disgusting. So if you rate a 1 on sprinkles, that means you find them disgusting. If you go to the 5 side, I'm going to label that as delicious. So we have our two extremes. I usually find it helpful to label them because sometimes 1 could be best, whereas 5 could be worst. So it really is useful for the respondent if you detail that out. It's optional, as you could probably tell from the text before I typed something in, but I usually like using it. I think it's a good practice. So with linear scale, you could just add a description if you want to. So if you want to expand a little bit more about maybe the history of sprinkles or why this is so polarizing as an ice cream topping. But otherwise, you could leave that alone and you have all your normal settings down here, the duplicate, the trash, and required. So moving right along, we click that plus button, and our next question type is actually one of these grid items. Now, I'm only going to do one because they're set up pretty much exactly the same. But if you click on our question type here, we have both multiple choice grid and checkbox grid. So multiple choice grid is good for something where you want one selection chosen out of the different columns you have. So just like your multiple choice, you can only make one selection. For checkbox grid, it's good for something like finding a time for a meeting or something like that, because you could check multiple boxes across the different columns. So we're going to do a multiple choice grid just because it is a little more restrictive, and I think that's interesting to look at. So for multiple choice grid, I'll give that a click, and we'll see here for our question, we'll put in, would you try the following flavors? So this is going to be a situation where we fill out the rows with the different flavors we want to ask about, and then in the columns, we fill out the different responses. So for each row, you can only make one selection across the columns. It makes a little more sense once you start filling it out. So for row 1, maybe I'll say something like lemon lush as an ice cream flavor. We'll go down to the next row with our enter key, and it'll be plum, which is probably a flavor. If you click the enter key again, we'll put praline, enter key again, and we'll hit pear, which is really good actually. Tastes like vanilla, but a little bit better. Then enter key again and pumpkin spice. And that is very apt for the new season now. Pumpkin spice ice cream is pretty delicious. So now for each of these ice cream flavors, what are the options that people can respond? So if my question is, would you try the following flavors? Maybe my different options would be no, and then hit the enter key, maybe, and hit the enter key again, and yes. So that would be like they would have to respond for each flavor, no, maybe, or yes. And that's what's different about the requirement for this kind of question type. Instead of requiring the question as a whole, it's requiring a response in each row. So if I make this required, they have to respond for every flavor that's here. If I don't click it, they can choose to do the question like if they want to, or they could choose not to do it at all. So I'm going to require a response in each row just because I want them to be able to go down each one. And I have enough options in my columns where they can select anything. So if they're not sure, if they would try praline, they could say maybe. They don't have to leave it unanswered. That's kind of the multiple choice grid. It also allows you to limit to one response per column. So if you wanted them to go on down the list of flavors here and say, you can only pick one flavor to say no to, one flavor to say maybe, and one flavor to say yes. That's what this would mean. You could also shuffle the row order so that the different flavors are in different places. Then you can add a description as well if you want to contextualize the question. So then what we're going to do now is actually go through and create an additional multiple choice question, because I want to see how we create a section based on a multiple choice answer. So maybe what we're going to do here is hit the plus button. It's already on multiple choice by default, and say, would you be willing to provide your favorite ice cream flavor? So we're asking them, like, if given the chance, would you want to provide your favorite ice cream flavor? And they can choose to say no, but if they say yes, we're going to bring them to a new section where they get asked what their favorite flavor is. If they say no, we're just going to have them submit the survey and that's it. So with this kind of multiple choice question where the options are very obvious, it's yes, no, you can click add all to these options, or you could just click on the individual ones you want, or you could type them out. So I'm just going to say yes and no, and those are my options. So now I'm going to click on this little kebab menu and click go to section based on answer. And that transforms our question type to have these extra drop-down boxes. And it's just saying what's the destination for a person who answers this option to this question. So this first thing says continue to next section. The next one says go to section 1, which is ice cream survey. That's what we're in currently, or submit the form. So I don't have a section currently, so what I need to do is actually make one. So I'm going to click on this add a section button, and it adds the section right beneath the question I was in, which is good. We just have to give it a title. We don't need a description on it, but the title is important because as you saw with those drop downs, it'll give you the title of the sections that you have, and then you can choose which one you want them to direct to. So this, I'm just going to change the title to favorite flavor. So now if I go here back to my multiple choice and I have it set to go to a different place if they respond a certain way, I can click continue to next section, and I'm actually going to change that to section 2. So if they say yes, I want to provide a new what my favorite flavor type is, you can send them off to the favorite flavor section because that's what they said they wanted to do. For this no option, we can say just go to the next section, which is the section 2, or if we don't want them to go there because they said they don't want to provide their favorite flavor, you can click submit form. So once they're done and they answer no, they can click submit and they're done with the form. Whereas if someone says yes, they go on to section 2 and then they can submit the form. So it's always good to have all the options selected here. You'll also see though, if you don't end up selecting a different option, you can say after section 1, you can either have it continue to the next section automatically, you can have it go to section 1, which we were already in. You can then have it go to section 2 for favorite flavor, or you could just have it submit the form. So I usually kind of do it in both places just in case I didn't make this required and they go past the question that branches them off. So now that I have this set up to go to section 2 if they answer yes, I want to fill out my section 2 a little bit. So I'm going to click down here and click the add button. We're just going to add one simple short answer question and say, what is your favorite ice cream flavor? That's a short answer question. It is required for those who came to this submit form, or sorry, they came to this section based on their answer here. And that's pretty much my form. That is my survey. After this, they can submit it, and then I'll get all those answers, and it'll be great. I do want to mention something before we move on to what it looks like for responses. If you come up here to your different questions and you feel like you want to move them around, you can definitely do that. You would just click on or hover over the question you want to move, and then click on it with your 4-pointed arrow and just drag it up or drag it wherever you want, and it kind of moves to accommodate the question that you're moving around. So that's something you could do at any time. And also, as I mentioned before, if you wanted to edit anything, you could just click on the question and it opens up the editing pane. All right, so now that we have our form all set up, we're ready to send it out. All you have to do now is just click on the send button. So if you click the purple send, it brings up this pop-up window. And since we have our emails set to be collected, this is the last chance really to select if you want them collected or not. You can choose a couple different options here for submitting or distributing your form. So the first one is email. You can choose to put in your emails here, but I don't really like doing this option just because it's a bit restrictive in how you set up your email. So the formatting is a little weird, not my favorite. But you can also see here that you can add collaborators again from this position, this page. So that's an option too. My favorite way to send out these forms is to go to this hyperlink option. And it gives you this really long link. So what you do is you just check the box to shorten it and then click the copy button. And it says copy to clipboard. And that means if you click Control V or Command V, if you're using a Mac, then it'll paste that link into an email if you're going to send one. So I click copy on that. You could also embed it in like a web page or something, but I feel like mostly we're sending these out via email. So I click copy on that. It's copied to my clipboard. Then what I'm going to do is hop back over to workshops, and I'm going to actually come over here and compose. So in my recipients, I'm going to send it to, let's say myself, just so we can see what a response would look like. The subject will be ice cream survey, and then please fill out my survey. Thank you so much. If you want to hyperlink a set of words for your survey instead of just pasting the link, you can highlight the text and then hit the little hyperlink button down here and just Control V or right click paste, and you'll put your link right in there, and there it is, all hyperlinked. So we can click send. It goes off to us. I got it, it's right here. So once a respondent gets your survey, they just click on it, they click on the link, and this is what it'll look like. So now it's saying, because we have that option to turn off auto-saving, and we didn't choose to do that, it now tells respondents that Google Forms saves your responses for 30 days. So it keeps it open for 30 days. If they have it on like a tab in their phone, it saves the progress for 30 days when you're signed in, and you can take a break. So if you didn't want them to wait that long to submit their form, maybe that's why you turn off auto saving. But either way, we have our ice cream survey. We can see our description here as well. We also see what account we're using, which is important because if you are like a staff and a student here at Marywood, or just in general, you have multiple Google accounts. You want to make sure this is the one you want displayed, especially if they're collecting email addresses. And you can see if they are, because it'll say email will be recorded. Sometimes it'll say the account here and say that this form is not collecting emails. So it'll just show you what account you're logged into, which is super helpful. If you wanted to switch your account to a different one, you're in the wrong account by some means, you can click switch account and change to the right one. And then this just means that it is auto-saving. So as we go down, we can type out our answers for the things that require text, and we can select the different multiple choice options for the ones that require clicking. So here I'll put my name, scroll on down. What are my feelings about ice cream? I love it. What's your favorite flavor? Strawberry is severely underrated. So I'll do that. What flavors sound appealing? Maybe Rocky Road. fudge-ripple cookies and cream, which type of cone, waffle cone. I love sprinkles, and I'd maybe try lemon lush. I would not try plum. Probably try praline. Yes, I would try pear and pumpkin spice. And then I would love to provide some feedback on my favorite ice cream flavor. So we have our progress bar here. We could clear the form if we want to just start from scratch, and then we can click next. All right, so because I answered yes to that question, I'm now getting this question as a result. But let me go back and click no, just to see what happens. All right, it's submitted, or it's almost submitted. So I clicked no, I did not get that extra question because I didn't redirect it that way, and I could submit it now if I want to. But I actually do want to provide my favorite question or my favorite flavor. So yes, it is the Tonight Dough from Ben & Jerry's. And then click submit. There we go. It's submitted. Now we have a response to our survey. So now if I go back to where I was editing the survey in the first place, I will see that I have some responses. So I have a nice little number 1 there. I can click over to my responses, and you get 3 different options for how to view the responses. So you get a summary, which means if you have more than one response, they're all summarized right here. You can also do it by question, so you can page through the different questions and see what the responses were for every single question. And then you can see individual. So if you didn't collect email addresses, I believe it's just like user 1, user 2, user 3. So it still like breaks them up. So each person has their own response set, but it doesn't give you the email associated. So you can see all of workshops responses and how it looked for me. You can also print these out if you like. You can toggle accepting responses or not accepting responses. So if you wanted to close up your form, you're done taking responses, you just click that little toggle, and you can provide a custom message to say, thank you for your support, but we are no longer accepting responses. Something else you could do with your responses to kind of get like time codes on them to see when they submitted something is to create a Google Sheet from the responses. So this can happen at any time in the response reception. You can do it before you accept responses. You can do it as they're coming in. Either way, you would just click on this little green button, and you can either put it in an existing spreadsheet in Google if you have one that you want to put all of your responses in, or you could create a new one and you can specify the name as well. So we'll click create. It's then created, and it actually brings over our response from the workshops account, and we could see a timestamp on it, the date and time it was submitted, and what our different options or different responses were. Each question gets its own column, and you can then sort and filter these as you like. Another thing that is cool here in the responses tab is this kebab menu. You can get email notifications for each new response. So if you're not checking this form every day, you can just get an email every time someone responds, and that is a great option. You can also select the response destination, which is that spreadsheet again. And then you can also unlink the form from the spreadsheet. You can download the responses as a CSV, which is something you could open in Excel. You could also print all the responses and then delete them all if you want to kind of start from scratch and send out to a new batch of people without changing the form. But that is pretty much the Google Forms breakdown. It's really not too bad. It's quite nice. It's really quite informal as well. So if you were looking for some sort of way to monitor preferences or see what people like, get an idea of what people are thinking about, or even this could be used for election ballots, finding times to meet and things like that. It's really quite useful. So if you have any questions, you could always call the help desk or submit a ticket at our help desk ticketing system, and we'll be happy to help you out.